Hello, North.
Hello.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
I really like your background. I was thinking about a lot of stuff that we talked last time, and what I have forgot to ask you is what inspired you to start North Zero Two?
When I first started North O2, I wasn't even necessarily focused on prehistory or archaeology. I was just I think I just wanted to explore things that had to do with like humans. So at that time, I was probably thinking anything like historical, modern day, anything really. But then I was really interested in just like ancient animals because it's just like paleontology more of, because it is just crazy that all these animals were just running around at some time. And even crazier that humans ran into a lot of these animals, which is what my next video is on. My next video is about all the animals that like the ancestors of the Native Americans encountered when they, crossed over and lived alongside many of these animals for like 7,000 years. Think of it like Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat. I got it right there. The short-faced bear.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they lived
Wow.
alongside these things for 7,000 years. So it's pretty insane. Like this is way bigger than any current bear alive. I mean, I guess you can kind of tell, but
Yeah.
so despite, having stone tools and living as hunter-gatherers, they were doing just fine, I guess, living alongside these animals. And they were even expanding across the continent, all the way to South America. And, we have a lot of evidence that they hunted some of the biggest animals like mastodons, mammoths, short-faced bear. There's even a site that they were chewing on one of those short-faced bears, actually. So we don't know if they
Oh.
killed it, but we know they were chewing on it. So I was just kind of interested in the story of humans and how they interacted with, megafauna, extinct creatures, and, the tools and weapons has always fascinated me. So yeah, I'd say that was like the main direction for my channel. After the first maybe 2 or 3 years of making videos, I was like, yeah, that is what interests me, and the audience likes it a lot too.
One of the first videos that I saw from you was about our nations, and I was amazed how good it was. You made your like 1 hour or something, 1.5 hour. I have to say also that you helped me a lot with the research, and mine are shorter, like 20 minutes, but every time I said thanks, North Zero Two. My question would be, what is your take on the Clovis first theory? Is it outdated?
Clovis first is they definitely weren't the first people in the Americas. We know that now because, the footprints in white sands, and there have been sites that we've known of for 10, 20 years, even longer than that, all the way down in South America that were 14, 15, 16,000 years old. So, but one of the reasons why Clovis first was still so prominent was just because like humans were archaeologically like almost invisible until Clovis points suddenly appeared and spread all over the continent. There's been pre-Clovis sites that we've known of for years. And in the past, 10 years, we've actually kind of figured out that Clovis most likely started like the tradition of making Clovis points. I should actually probably go grab some. Actually, wait, I have some. I have the biggest Clovis point ever discovered right here, a cast of
Oh,
it.
wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's the Roots Clovis point. I have it
Yeah.
attached to some clay right here. I don't know if I
Yes.
can get this off, but there's the other side of it. And so Clovis points likely like the technology of taking a flake off of the base and just it's complicated bifacial flint knapping is what it is, and it's really difficult. And prior to that, there was complicated points in the Americas as well. But after they developed that technology, it really just likely developed. The Galt site in Texas is one of the sites that they're like, okay, so Clovis might have appeared in this area, and then it spread all the way through North America, and then all the way down Central, and then into parts of South America, like Northern South America. I mean, it's really just fascinating. Like, it's hard to understand it really because it's not necessarily the same people. The technology could have spread to different people, but all of a sudden, Clovis technology appeared, and they're like, wow, this stuff works really well. And then the next few centuries, because Clovis was only around for, less than 2,000 years, which in like Paleolithic terms basically is pretty quick. And it spread all over, and it was probably used for hunting megafauna. Megafauna just means an animal over about 100 pounds or 45 kilograms. So they were definitely using it to hunt megafauna, whether it was deer, horse, even up to mammoths. There's no doubt that they were hunting with it, but obviously there's debates over if they were able to take down mammoths and other megafauna. But a lot of evidence suggests that Clovis points certainly could kill a mammoth. but maybe not reliably, and maybe it wasn't the best technology possible for hunting an animal as large as a mammoth. But we have plenty of sites, plenty of butchery sites that they were killing mammoths. And there's even a site found in Mexico City where there's a pit, and I believe there's like 14 different mammoths that they found in this pit. And they think that humans dug this pit and like corralled mammoths into it and somehow killed them and butchered them there. So I definitely do not underestimate, you'd say, Paleo-Indian or Clovis hunters in their pursuit of megafauna. They're certainly good at hunting megafauna. So
How do you decide what your topics would be?
it's really just whatever I'm thinking of during that month, whatever I'm interested in, or whatever I think the audience wants to watch as well. I mean, that's really largely what it is. It's a marketing. I mean, being a YouTuber is being a marketer. You got to make videos that people are going to watch. But I also, combine that with what I want to see on YouTube, which is content about Clovis points and Clovis people and megafauna and stuff like that.
Do you ever face pushback from archaeologists or historians or other YouTubers?
I wouldn't really say, I mean, when I cover something such as like maybe the extinction of the megafauna or like a big topic like that where clearly there's no, I mean, I try to make the topic all inclusive and not one-sided. So no, I don't think I've really ever had like an archaeologist reach out to me or a scientist reach out to me saying like, no, this is wrong. I don't think that's ever really happened because I try to frame it pretty like neutrally and all encompassing. So it's not one-sided pretty much. I have a lot of friends who are archaeologists and it's like, they know so much about the topics that it's like, it might seem super nitpicky to us and it might be pretty nitpicky, but in their minds, it's like, hey, no, this is actually wrong because of this. But then another archaeologist might tell you, no, that's actually correct because of this. So, I mean, it's always a debate. So that's why primarily I just try to frame it in a fair way. If there's like two opposing sides on a certain topic, you just kind of have to put all the information there so that it's like neutrally presented. I'd say that's how I try to stay out of any trouble like that. But I mean, I'm all for people pointing out if I said anything wrong. And sometimes maybe I'd pin a comment. I've done that, I think, once or twice, like, oh, this information was actually incorrect in this video. So
have you ever changed your mind about historical theory?
Definitely. One I can definitely, I mean, this happened tens of times for sure, dozens of times probably. But one of the things definitely that I changed my mind on pretty recently was in my Upper Paleolithic series, I was saying how clubs, a weapon, I was like, they probably didn't even really use them because they had like their hunting spears and their other tools. Why would you really need a club? A club's not really going to kill a deer or a bear. I thought of clubs as more of like a personal defense weapon during like Neolithic times, which we know they used them as. But I think recently I've realized while researching like Australian Aboriginals and like other more like ethnographic cultures is that clubs are actually really useful. A stick with maybe a stone at the end, or not even a stone, just a piece of wood. It's a pretty useful tool, whether it be for defending yourself or even hunting, like there's an injured animal or something like that. So yeah, I said in the video that, yeah, they probably didn't use clubs, probably wasn't a tool, but now I've definitely gone way back on that. And I think clubs are actually a very important tool. Yeah, I definitely have changed my mind completely. And, I used to think like humans didn't have a large role on like the extinction of the megafauna in certain places, but I think I've changed my mind on that a lot. I think there's a lot of evidence to say that actually humans had a substantial impact on a lot of the megafauna, depending on the continent and depending on the time and the place. Yeah, it varies, but I think I've changed my mind on that for sure.
What's one thing that you think it deserves more attention than it actually has?
I'd say one of the most underrated things about the Upper Paleolithic that people don't think about, or prehistory in general, is just like how much stuff we don't see of these people's possessions that have simply just eroded away, such as like things made of wood, things made of hide, anything that was painted that wasn't inside of a cave, a bunch of just, I think their lives would have been a lot more vibrant than people think about. I feel like when we imagine like Paleolithic people or something, we imagine they only had like a few possessions, like a stone point, a spear, and maybe like some sunglasses if you're up in the high Arctic or something. But in reality, I think they would have had a lot more things and like a lot of things that might seem strange to us. With the discovery of Utsi the Iceman, we learned that just how many things these people were carrying around even 5,000 years ago. He had so many possessions on him. And he was an outdoorsman, so think of how many possessions Paleolithic people would have had on them. And I don't mean possessions just as in materialistic kind of thing, but it's their lives were a lot more complicated and revolved around a lot more little things. And I'm sure they would have carried around little portable pieces of art, we know they carried around stuff like this. Like this is from the Vogel herd cache. This is a replica. And this is just like a form of art. And a lot of these have like wear on them as if they were carrying them around every day. It's not just something they made and then put in their pocket or left in a cave. Like they would have carried these around, maybe gave them to their children to play around with or something. But yeah, I just think their lives were a whole lot more like vibrant than we will ever really be able to know of because of just the nature of how artifacts and things are preserved. Anything of like soft material or not of ivory or stone isn't really going to survive 40,000 years in most conditions, but some conditions preserve it.
I made a video while I was still doing only podcasts, not exclusively YouTube. I invented a story about these Vogel herd figurines, and imagining that they were for the kids to play. I imagine it. It's fiction and it's called Art Stories. And I have few of those and I want to write one with you. Blending of archaeology, anthropology, and even sometimes mythology, if it's available. Do you see them as of equal value to understand the past?
I guess I'm probably biased, but I'd say archaeology is the most important to just see exactly like how they're interacting with things in their daily life, because that includes like animal remains that they altered.
Yeah.
But I'd say, well, with Paleolithic, you can't really know their mythology for certain. You can look at their some of their objects and hypothesize, but there are for certain cultures, definitely more recent ones, you can like look at their mythology and get a way better understanding of the culture. And I'd say paleontology it's important. It's really important to know about the species they would have interacted with and like the behavior of these species as well, because that can tell you how these people were moving around the landscape, how they might have been hunting, and like just their daily lives. But I'd say archaeology to me is the most important. I love every time I see a new artifact that like ancient people use, it just like broadens my understanding. And I just got this book, and it's about like this is about like Native American artifacts, pretty much like contact artifacts. There's a lot of stone tools and like the arrows they were using in the past 400 or 500 years. Yeah, and it's really interesting. Like there's a lot of stone tipped stuff, and here are like harpoons. This is I guess it's for hunting sea otters, just how interesting is that? Like I never would have even thought about that, hunting a sea otter with a bone tipped arrow. And yeah, there's just so much. I just love looking at like ethnographic stuff as well. Like that's what, you'd consider that because it's like recent, people actually got to meet the people who were making those tools. And that's one of the reasons I find Australian Aboriginals so fascinating, which is what I hope to cover a lot this year. Just a lot of their artifacts, and like we know how they were using them, and we know a lot about their mythology as well, which is super interesting.
How many books do you read or papers when you're making one episode?
It depends on like if I'm actually trying to get into like a scientific discussion, like if I'm talking about megafauna or like a climate change, like the Younger Dryas, then I actually have to go in and like read a lot of papers, and like that's pretty difficult. I mean, it is for anyone, especially if I'm not super versed in archaeological, discussions like that. So it's harder for me to read than a lot of my friends. But yeah, I'd say for one of those videos, like 20 to 30 studies you probably have to look at. But if I'm just doing like an overview about like animals that we encountered or something, then a lot less, because then I just need the specific sources about like this site where we did this with their remains, or this site where we found a bone point in a mastodon vertebrae. Then like I need that specific source and I'll read into that. So
what do you think about when they say that, let's say our nation, for example, or Clovis people only moved their own designated area?
I mean, I think it depends a lot on like like the climate of the area. Because if you think about it too, like Europe or just Eurasia, the whole northern plain there, horizontally, it's the same latitude. It's the same like environment from each side. It's the great steppe, right? So you could hypothetically traverse from east to west and not even necessarily notice, it's not getting any colder or any warmer because you're not going north or south. So hypothetically, you could traverse a great distance. And I know for sure that Gravettian culture made it all the way to what is this, to the Malta culture, or they seem to have inspired a culture way far away in I think it's all the way in like Kazakhstan or like Mongolia is where some of these sites are, like, or maybe just far into Siberia. It seems they were directly inspired by Gravettians, which that's all the way in Poland, like Central Europe. So I think ideas could certainly spread really far. And back then, I mean, there wasn't anything really stopping people from spreading far. It wasn't like the times of like Alexander the Great, where every other 100 miles there's another group of people who you have to fight or might be hostile to you. Back in the day, you could probably just walk, So I don't doubt. I mean, we know for sure that stone, like valuable stone, even in Neanderthal times, moved over 100, 300 kilometers. And was that one group of people moving that? Probably not. It was probably traded between multiple Neanderthal groups, but like obsidian or quality flint would really move. And that's the same in the Americas and other places as well. So I don't doubt that people themselves or just through trade could move like, very vast distances for sure.
That leads me to one question that I need to ask you about the thing that most of the people never heard of, Solitarian hypothesis. What are your thoughts about that? Maybe we should explain first what is Solitarian hypothesis first.
Solitarian hypothesis is that hunter-gatherers from Western Europe, notably northern Spain and southern France and the Cantabrian region, like Pyrenees Mountains, they were a great, so there's a great culture of hunter-gatherers there that lived during the Solutarian period in Europe, around 20,000 years ago. And these people were making like really advanced points. Actually, I have one over there. I could go grab it in a second. Yeah. But these were really advanced points, and they were a pretty seemingly advanced Upper Paleolithic culture too. They had like complex art, and we know they made like complicated bone tools as well. And the idea is that they were the first people to cross into the Americas via sea ice on the Atlantic, because back during the Upper Paleolithic, it was a lot colder. So the whole northern Atlantic froze over just as it does, the North Pole. So the idea is that they walked 2,000 miles, was it? I don't remember the distance off the top of my head, but they walked across this sea ice, hunting seals and maybe fish along the way, which is hypothetically possible. And then they made it to the Americas. They were the first people there, and they just survived there for thousands of years. They are the reason why Clovis people made complex points that used a certain type of flaking called overshot flaking. And people who support the Solutarian hypothesis, like researchers like Bruce Bradley, cite, like, there are some certain lithics in the Americas. Like, they found, I forget the name of the point, but they found this specific point they dredged up from the sea, and it looks very Solutarian, and it's apparently pretty old, right? If it's underwater in the sea, you would assume that maybe that's been there since, the Ice Age, since the sea level rose. Yeah, so the idea is that there's a connection there, but there's a lot of problems with it, and there's a reason why it's not widely accepted or even really considered anymore, is because the technological connection between Clovis and Solutarian is not really that great. Bruce Bradley has great arguments for it because he's a great flint knapper, but a lot of researchers would say that overshot flaking is really not, it's not crazy coincidental that they would have come up with the same kind of flaking, especially when they're trying to make thin bifaces like that. The coincidence isn't big enough, basically, for you to warrant a connection between Europe and the Americas, or otherwise genetically there is no connection. We've never found any connection there. There's also a 7,000-year gap between the end of the Solutarian culture and Clovis culture, like, developing their point. So basically, people would say, okay, so this is a straw man, but it would be like, okay, so these people crossed over from Europe all the way to the Americas. They hung out for 7,000 years and didn't really leave a record, in like an archaeological record. And then all of a sudden, 13,000 years ago, they're like, okay, let's bring this technology back and start making all these points. That's basically the criticism, but there's a lot more nuance to it, of course. But it's hypothetically possible. I'm not saying that we should just, throw it away and pretend like it doesn't exist. But yeah, there's just not a whole lot of evidence to back the Solutarian hypothesis, at least, for the Americas.
What do you think is the biggest mystery about pre-Columbian Americans?
I'm not super well read on like South American archaeology or even Mesoamerican archaeology. I really only know like a good amount about North American archaeology, but I'm super interested in the great copper or the old copper culture. You know, Native Americans using copper since at least 9,000 years ago in the Americas, which is as early as basically any other population of humans on Earth. And they were using copper since 9,000 years ago up until around 4 or 5 thousand years ago when they didn't stop, but they've like stopped using it for tools, at least in the Great Lakes region, and mainly focus on using it for more ceremonial stuff. And they kind of stopped their mining processes as well. So it's kind of a mystery on why they stopped. I talked to a lot of researchers about this. A geologist, David Pompiani, we're going to actually go this summer and tour some of these mines and talk to some archaeologists and professionals about the old copper culture. And yeah, we really don't know why they stopped using copper for tools. Copper is a great material for tools, but they went back to using stone for a lot of their tools. And there's been some research on why extracting copper from the earth is really difficult. You know, how the Native Americans did it is they would like basically heat up the rock. So yeah, they'd heat up the rock with like a campfire, and then they'd douse it with water, which would make the rock more brittle. And then they could go in with a large pounding stone and literally just break the rock, and it would free the natural copper that is found in the veins of the rock. And then they would use this copper for tools. They would never melt it, but they would just heat it up, and then it would make it malleable. And then they'd pound it out into shape, and they just do that over and over again. It's a really laborious process. But at the end of it, they do have great tools. And actually, I have a old copper culture knife right here. This is an authentic old copper culture knife.
How old is it?
It's not dated, but I mean, it's at least 4 or 5 thousand years old. I assume. I'd have to ask one of my friends who actually studies it more. But yeah, there's thousands of artifacts just like that, and they use copper for a long time. And I mean, I've experimented with like making my own copper tools, and they're great tools. Like it's soft, but when you cold hammer it, it gets pretty hard. Like it's like it can be kind of almost as hard as mild steel. I mean, bronze is as hard as mild steel, but copper is up there for sure. So it's definitely a useful tool compared to. I love stone, but you know, there's limitations to stone. And here's a Salutrian point, if anyone was wondering what they looked like. Yeah, so this is a nice laurel leaf Salutrian point. I hope you can kind of see the. Oh, there you go. Now you can really see the flake scars, which are flake scars are left over when you take a flake off. It's the yeah, stones are cool. Stone tools are really cool, and you can do a lot with them. But I mean, I do think copper is just better as a metal because it's more malleable. And that's one of the things that me and David Pompiani have been talking about. You know, he's actually a scientist. He's a geologist, but he's worked with archaeologists, and he has a hypothesis that the reason why they went through all this trouble to get copper is because it's really malleable and you can use it for fish hooks and stuff. And I actually caught a sturgeon on a copper fish hook this year, or I guess last year.
So your videos have been demonetized.
If your video gets like fully demonetized, then it basically might as well be removed because the algorithm just won't really show it to anybody. So the only way someone can watch it is if they like go to your page and then click on the video, or if somehow they specifically looked up the title or something. But yeah, I mean, when a video gets demonetized, it's basically just dead in the water. So I've definitely got a lot of that. My last video got demonetized because I showed a blurred. So the image is an image of the Tong child, a young Australopithecine running from an eagle. And, you know, this was 2 million years ago. There wasn't such thing as clothes. So it's a kid running without clothes, but the artist didn't even draw it with genitals. I mean, it's a kid, obviously. And, but I went the extra step to blur it out just in case. And then they still demonetized me just for the thumbnail, not even for what was in the video, for the thumbnail. I couldn't even put chimpanzee boobs in a video, breasts in a video. That would get me demonetized, which is hilarious because that's just it's a non-human primate. And so was Homo erectus. I mean, you could say it's a non-human primate, but if you try to show any artistic depiction or even a scientific anatomical drawing of one of these species, they'll demonetize you. And it's largely automated, but even when humans check over it, they are like, nope, none of this. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
And
It's
I don't understand it still, because nobody cares. Nobody cares except these policies that they put there. I don't know even for whom, because kids nowadays, if they want to see nudity, they can see it on their iPhones. What do you think? Do you think that YouTube algorithm favors certain narratives over others when it comes to history, conspiracies, and so on?
I mean, naturally, like conspiracy stuff gets a lot of views because it's interesting, but I don't think there's like an algorithm bias towards it. And I mean, the reason my videos are getting demonetized is just because it's an advertiser thing. They want the like everything on the site to be completely clean of any anything even possibly construed as offensive to advertisers. So that's why it's just an automated big machine thing. It's not like they're targeting me or anything like that. It's just a lost in bureaucracy kind of thing. So do you know the origin of like why why it's so censored on YouTube?
Why?
Like the ad apocalypse. Have you ever heard about that?
No.
It was back in like 2015, 16. Basically, there was videos of ISIS beheadings on YouTube, and with like Coca-Cola ads playing before the video of extremely graphic, horrible stuff. And because YouTube had no system in place to be like, this video can't be monetized because it's so bad. So that was, and after that, a lot of companies pulled off of YouTube momentarily, and a bunch of YouTubers stopped making money. That's why they called it the adpocalypse. I wasn't on YouTube at the time, but ever since then, they got really sensitive about what they could monetize. And I mean, I think that's largely the reason why we're still dealing with stupid stuff like having to censor homo erectus boobs. I think it really does go all the way back to 2016, I think it was.
I mean, the more I hear about these Talibans and ISIS and these idiots, the more I despise them.
Yeah,
Seriously.
ruining YouTube.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, oh. How do you navigate YouTube's content policies while you're still producing thought-provoking videos?
I mean, it is hard because you have to self censor a little bit. Like, one of my favorite videos I made was about cannibalism, which is a pretty heavy
Yeah.
topic, but and that did get demonetized, unfortunately. But yeah, I know you kind of have to like tiptoe around what you talk about, which is really unfortunate. Like I've always wanted to make a video on like warfare and like the origin of violence and stuff, but I've kind of just delayed it because I'm like, well, I could spend 2 months working on this video just for it to not make me a penny, which is just not very economical. I mean,
Yeah.
but and as far as any kind of nudity, I mean, I just have to blur all these beautiful paintings of Australopithecines. It's just so unnecessary, and the audience feels the same way. They're like, I'm not watching your channel. Dislike for blurring out nudity. And I usually will respond to those comments being like, hey, it's not my choice. So it's unfortunate, but have to listen to the YouTube overlords and do their bidding because you don't have a choice. So,
Have you considered alternative platforms for your content?
I mean, there's no other like competitor to YouTube. I mean, I use Instagram and I guess sometimes I use X, um, but they're just kind of supplementary, or TikTok as well. They're for different content. YouTube is the only big platform that you can use, and I don't really have too many complaints about YouTube, to be honest. I can't really bash it in any way. It's a pretty great platform, so
Yeah.
I just have to adapt to it, really.
Okay. Are you familiar with genetics and DNA, right?
A little bit, yeah. I
Yeah.
can't say I'm very good at understanding it, but
Okay. But how do you view the role of genetics in understanding the first Americans?
People were first in the Americas 15 to 18,000 years ago, I think is the date, usually given by genetics. But archaeologically, we know from those footprints that people were here 21 to 23,000 years ago. So it's entirely possible that a different wave of people came to the Americas, maybe even 30, 40,000 years ago, and they died out. And then the ancestors of Native Americans came in, and they were just a completely distinct wave of people, which would make a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. But I think that's a great example of how genetics is important, but we have to remember that genetics, especially if we're using genetics of living people or even more recent fossils, remains, aren't necessarily just a completely distinct wave of people, which would make a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. There's blind spots in them as well, because like I just said, there could be whole lineages of people that you just don't have evidence for, yet they live there. And genetics would never tell you that. I mean, it can't unless you have their DNA. Yeah, genetics easily been the most quickly evolving and important field of like understanding prehistory in the past 30 years, probably even more than that. I'm not quite sure.
What tools or technologies from the American Paleolithic stand out as particularly advanced?
Well, there's this certain kind of point which I've been researching for this new video I'm working on, and so whatever, Clovis points appeared like 12,800 years ago, or 13,000 is like kind of when they first appeared. Here's a cast of one, a different one, and so they spread all around and spread all the way to South America, and then in South America a little later on. Clovis points might have inspired, or they could have independently developed, but there's these points called fishtail points, and they're like a Clovis point. Like they have the flutes, just like a Clovis point, the flutes at the base.
Yes.
I guess you can't really see it with the black point, but and this is for, it's easier to haft it onto a stick when there's like a convex or a concave surface there, and but basically a fishtail point is just like this, but then it widens out here.
Yeah.
So it widens from the base. So it's a very similar technology, and those appeared a little later than Clovis and spread all over South America. And like their biggest concentrations were in areas with a lot of megafauna, and then the megafauna, a lot of it went extinct. And then when they were extirpated from most of the South America, those points disappeared as well. The people started making smaller points that were easier to make because they were presumably hunting smaller animals. So I think the fishtail points are basically like the southern Clovis points in a way, because, they're linked to the extinction of the megafauna. They might be directly derived from Clovis points, and no one's really heard about them. So it's really interesting to to talk about them, because people are always Clovis this, Clovis that. Largely because of Graham Hancock, honestly, is why people are always Clovis first, Clovis this. Yeah. But no one ever talks about the fishtail points that might have made, giant ground sloths and glyptodonts and a bunch of different cool animals go extinct in South America.
What a nice segue you just did. Graham Hancock.
I said it always leads back to Graham Hancock. All roads lead to Graham.
So why do you think conspiracy theories have become so mainstream in recent years?
There's a certain if you're trying to go like wider scale, it's like a conspiracy theory in its essence, whether it's true or not true, is like an anti-establishment idea. It's like, it's like the man is screwing us over, and this is why, because and then there's some elaborate reason on why this conspiracy is true and who's setting it up. And some conspiracies are true, and even if they're not, a lot of them are super interesting. Like, I'm not going to lie, I like to sometimes watch videos about alien conspiracies, like in the U.S. government. Conspiracy theories are so prevalent, especially in U.S. culture and politics, that it's like, just how do we even distinguish fact from reality when it's, and they just, I don't know, conspiracies don't interest me as much anymore, because it's just like, I'd rather hear about substantiated things we know. And that's why when bringing this back to like archaeology, like it's really cool for Graham to talk about this comet came and hit the earth 12,000 years ago and it destroyed this lost culture, because it's like an intriguing story. Like, Atlantis itself is a story, and it's a fun mystery. And Graham comes at it though with this like it's not a good or bad thing, but he comes at it with like this anti-establishment idea, like archaeologists are not accepting these ideas because they're too locked in their ways and too dogmatic. Like that's where he comes from. And I mean, you can see why that's such a like captivating and enthralling idea, because it's like, oh, I can join Graham and then we're going to be against the mainstream and we're like maverick renegades, you know. It's like you're getting in on something that's interesting and cool and you're on this new wave of, you know. So I get like the whole psychological reason for it. And Graham also happens to be like an exceptionally good orator, podcast guest, and author too. He's just really good at those, regardless of if I agree with his ideas. So there's no doubt why this spread, and it has to do honestly with larger, definitely societal trends of just conspiracies being prevalent in mainstream life now. Like if I talk to my dad about politics, the first 10 words out of his mouth, it's a conspiracy in this place, a conspiracy that's doing, like, there's always something, right? And it's like when all you talk about is conspiracies, it's like, how do you even like anything can be true if you just believe in all these conspiracies. Like you could just make up a conspiracy. Well, that's not true because of it. Like the confirmation bias is just off the charts. And I am not a fan of conspiracies. Basically, I think it's just going away from knowledge as we know it. You know,
Why YouTube is pushing these conspiracies all the time?
well, I think it's just like basic human psychology of just like a lot of these videos are really clickable. You know, it'll be like the title will be like archaeologists just found something mind blowing in the pyramids, and then it'll be like a picture of a pyramid with like an alien buried in dirt with like a gas mask on, like he's an astronaut or something. And for people who know nothing about archaeology, you know, they just got off of their day job where, you know, they don't really care about these things that much, but they see a video like that, they're just like, oh, whoa, cool. I think I heard about that on Rogan. And then they'll just click on it and be like, but then, you know, 5 minutes goes by and they're like, okay, that was just a bunch of word salad. I didn't even really learn anything. So then they leave. So even though they gave this person their click, they leave just feeling completely unsatisfied. Like, oh, that was just probably nonsense, or that was stupid. And so I think it's just kind of a basic psychological thing where people, you know, it is a clickable, clickbaity thumbnail, and that's why they get a lot of views. And but that's why I think like what I do or some other creators, obviously like yourself, like we actually talk about things that exist, like a Vogelherd figurine or something. Like it's a real thing that exists that we found, and we can talk about it, and it's substantial. Like there's actually something to it. And I think people who have the the brain power to watch one of those, because, you know, I mean, I'm guilty of it myself, of having a short attention span. So I get that. But it's like when you actually watch one of these videos and really think about it and like think, oh, wow, they pulled that out of the dirt and it's real. It's not hinging on some conspiracy. It's just a matter of fact thing. I think it's a lot more fulfilling and just better overall. So at the end of the day, it's still a battle of marketing. Like my videos or any YouTuber's videos, it's like you're a marketer too. If you're a YouTuber, you're a marketer. So I have to make my videos like put in the thumbnail like we were prey, or like a million. I'd have to think some of the last ones I did, but it's like you have to be dramatic, and I honestly really don't like being dramatic. I think it's kind of like just kind of corny. Like I don't want to be like that, but it's just a matter of the marketing, and I'm fine to do it if I get your click and then you actually get to watch like a good substantial video. So
What is art?
when I make something, or especially like when I make like stone tools, or which is to me is art, because I don't usually make like I don't really paint or draw or anything these days, but I do like making stone tools or metal tools, or and primarily when I make those kind of tools, because they're prehistoric tools chiefly, is I guess I'm trying to get in the minds of the people who were making them, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 years ago. So I guess my definition would have to be centered something around like experiencing the human condition through material, like through a material medium, I guess I'd say.
Yeah.
So like when I make like a Uzi the Iceman like copper axe, which I like making those, like I feel like I'm connecting to like people who lived before, or when I flint knap, like I know that there's some human, hitting off a flake from a biface, and they're like, wow, that was a good flake, and they look at it, and it's cool to know that you're having the same thoughts and the same expression as someone who lived 10,000 years ago. So yeah, that's what I would describe my definition of art, at least in my current definition.
Well, there is a reason why it's called art and crafts. And
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I do art since I was 16, and do especially history of art. I really love history of art. That's obvious. So if okay, if you would have I know that you spoke about Gravettian hunter. If you would meet a Gravettian hunter and hunt with him or her, what would you do?
I'd probably be quiet and let them show me what they do, because I'm probably just going to be loud and obnoxious and do things that are not good in their that they don't see as good in their culture. Or I'm just going to be trying to learn from everything they're doing. I'm going to be looking at the way they walk, the way they run, the way they do all kinds of things, just because it would be such an alien world, such an alien existence to me, who lives in a city and drinks coffee every day and makes YouTube videos. You don't understand the kind of hunting and gathering these people are doing on a daily basis. So it's like, no matter who you are, pretty much, unless you fully live outdoors and fully hunt every day, like it's going to be a total alien world to like all of us, pretty much. So I would literally just watch every move they do and just try to fit in, I guess, is what my answer would be. Some kind of hunter of megafauna would be one of my answers. Like, definitely, like, here's a Gravettian point. It's a very nice point. That would be an option, but Clovis would be cool too. I would like to see how they use those points and how they hunted megafauna. But also, I'd probably say, like, as dark as it might sound, like one of those wars, like being able to witness a battle of like Alexander the Great, or like the Romans fighting the Gauls or something like that. I mean, I feel like we have maybe a pretty rosy picture, unrealistic. Like, it would be cool to see a battle. It'd be horrible. People would be dying, of course. But to see a battle like that would be interesting, at least.
I wish you all the best, and I wish a lot of people would watch your YouTube. It's really good.
Thank you. I mean, other people have inspired me to be a YouTuber as well. Like, there's plenty of people I could name. And at the end of the day, it's the archaeologists who are in the field digging up the dirt so we can even be here to talk about it. So obviously, thanks to them as well. So Thanks for having me on.
You're always welcome. Bye.
Bye.